Hello students, myself Prakash Chandra Paricha. I am head of the Department of Zoology, Ramadevi Women's University, Bhubaneswar. In the last class, we discussed the mechanism of urine formation. Today, we will start the class with osmoregulation. Osmoregulation is the process by which water and salt content of the body is regulated, so that the body fluid is neither becomes too dilute or too concentrated. The cells, for their efficient performance, they require a constant condition. If the composition of the body fluid, here when we say body fluid, it means the fluid which is present inside the cell, that is the cell content. Also the fluid which is present outside the cell, which includes blood plasma or blood, then tissue fluid, also lymph. If the composition of the body fluid changes, or if it does not remain constant, then efficient functioning of the cells is hampered. That's why it is very important that the water and salt content of body fluids is regulated, or it is maintained within a narrow range, or it is maintained more or less at a constant level. So that's why osmoregulation is very much important. Kidneys, besides being the main excretory organ concerned with removal of nitrogenous waste materials of the body, they also are involved in regulating the water content and salt content of the body fluid. We will see now how kidneys they regulate the concentration of the body fluids. As we have already discussed the structure of nephron, you may recall that the nephron has a loop of Henle. Suppose this is the loop of Henle. It is U-shaped, having two limbs. This is the descending limb, which moves downwards towards the medulla from the cortex region, and this is the ascending limb. This loop of Henle acts as a counter current multiplier system. This loop of Henle helps in producing a highly concentrated urine. The two limbs of the loop of Henle, they have different properties. Suppose this is the wall of the descending limb. The wall of the descending limb is highly permeable to water, and it is not very permeable to the ions, whereas the wall of the ascending limb, it is permeable to ions, but it is completely impermeable to water. This space between the two limbs of loop of Henle, it is the renal medulla, and here interstitial fluid is present, that is known as renal interstitial medullary interstitial fluid. So this is the medullary tissue which contains interstitial fluid. The filtrate comes from the proximal convoluted tubule, then it enters the descending limb, then it makes a turn, then it rises in the ascending limb towards the distal convoluted tubule. This medullary tissue or the interstitial fluid which is present here is rich in salt content. From the ascending limb of loop of Henle, there is transport of sodium ions, potassium ions and chloride ions into this medullary tissue. The wall is permeable to these ions, sodium ions, potassium ions and chloride ions. So from the filtrate here, these substances, sodium ions, potassium ions and chloride ions, they are absorbed. The cells which are present here in the wall of the ascending limb, within those cells, concentration of sodium is low. Suppose this is one such cell here in the wall of the ascending limb. Here sodium ion is present. This is the inside of the cell. Inside, the sodium concentration is low. Suppose here the filtrate is present. This is the lumen of or cavity of ascending limb. Suppose here this is the lumen of the ascending limb where the filtrate is present, where sodium ions are present. So these sodium ions, they diffuse into the cell with the help of carrier protein. Here carrier proteins are present. With the help of carrier protein, the sodium ions diffuse into the cell because here the sodium concentration is low. Here at the opposite end, there is a sodium potassium pump. You can see here, this cell has carrier protein. This is the lumen of the ascending limb where the filtrate is present. From here, sodium diffuses into this cell. It diffuses down its concentration gradient. Inside the cell, sodium concentration is low. Sodium concentration is low because of the operation of the sodium potassium pump here. At the other end, the cell membrane has many such sodium potassium pumps. These sodium potassium pumps, they are driven by ATP, as you can see here. Operation of this sodium potassium pump requires energy in the form of ATP. These sodium potassium pumps simultaneously transport sodium ions and potassium ions. Every time the pump operates, it will remove 3 sodium ions from the cell and it will take in 2 potassium ions into the cell. Since the sodium ions are being constantly pumped out of the cell, inside sodium concentration is low. That's why sodium ions from the filtrate will diffuse into the cell. Then from here they will be transported out of the cell and they come to this part, the medullary tissue. Here the carrier protein not just transports sodium ions, it will also transport potassium ions and chloride ions. So the same carrier protein will simultaneously transport these 3 ions: sodium ions, potassium ions and chloride ions. Sodium ions, they are moved down the concentration gradient, and as the same carrier is carrying these 2 ions, these ions they also move into the cell against the concentration gradient. So this is how sodium is taken into the cell. Simultaneously potassium and chloride, they are taken into the cell. Then they will move out of the cell into this interstitial fluid of the renal medulla. This occurs continuously. Since these ions are being constantly pumped out of the ascending limb into this medullary tissue, here there will be high concentration of these ions or these solutes. That's why here the salt concentration or the concentration of these substances is high. As I have already told you, this limb, the descending limb, wall of the descending limb is permeable to water. It is highly permeable to water. The filtrate comes here. When the filtrate enters the descending limb, it is in isotonic state. Isotonic means here the solute concentration in the filtrate is same as that of blood plasma. So in that isotonic state, it enters the descending limb. As it moves downwards, and this limb is surrounded by interstitial fluid which is rich in these solutes, there will be osmosis of water from the descending limb to the surrounding interstitial fluid or the renal medullary tissue. So as the fluid or the filtrate moves downwards in the descending limb, more and more water is drawn out of the filtrate into this interstitial fluid. So you can see here, as the filtrate moves downwards, the solute concentration increases. The figures 300, 600, 900, 1200, all these figures which are written here, they indicate the osmolarity or the solute concentration of the filtrate. It is expressed in units milliosmoles per liter. Suppose the solute concentration here is 300 milliosmoles per liter. As it moves downward, it increases to 600 milliosmoles per liter. Likewise, you can see here 900. Then here maximum concentration is attained. It is 1200. So maximum you can see here 1200, the solute concentration. As we move downwards in the descending limb, the solute concentration increases and it may rise up to say 1200 milliosmoles per liter. So as the fluid goes downwards in the descending limb, more and more water is reabsorbed into this tissue fluid and it becomes more and more concentrated. Then it passes through the band, then it goes upwards in the ascending limb. As you can see here, as it moves upwards, these ions are pumped out of this filtrate into the tissue fluid, so that you can see here the solute concentration decreases. You can see here when it enters this band, it is 1200 milliosmoles per liter. Then as it ascends in the ascending limb, it decreases to 1000, then 700, then 400, then by the time it leaves the ascending limb, the solute concentration is as low as 100 milliosmoles per liter. So you can see here this occurs continuously. From the descending limb, water is constantly drawn out into the interstitial fluid because of the presence of high concentration of salts in the surrounding tissue fluid. And here these sodium ions, potassium ions and chloride ions pumped out into this interstitial fluid. So because of this, here in this renal medullary tissue, a solute gradient is established. You can see here, this is the solute gradient, 300, 600, 900, 1200. These represent the solute concentration in milliosmoles per liter. So as we move from the cortex downwards into the medulla, the solute concentration increases. This is the counter current multiplier system which resides in this loop of Henle. It is called counter current multiplier system because the flow of fluid or filtrate in the two limbs is in opposite direction. Here in this descending limb, it moves downwards from the cortex towards the medulla, and in the ascending limb it is in the opposite direction from the medulla towards the cortex. So this is counter current. Flow of filtrate or fluid in the two limbs is in opposite direction, that is counter current. It is called multiplier system, counter current multiplier system. Multiplier system it is called because this system is capable of establishing a solute gradient in the medullary tissue. As you can see here, solute gradient has been established. Starting from 300 up to 1200, a solute gradient has been established in the medullary tissue. As we move deep into the medulla, the solute concentration increases in the renal medullary tissue. So this is how these substances they are absorbed in the renal medulla, and this loop of Henle helps in producing a highly concentrated urine. Here in this loop of Henle, there exists another counter current system. This was a counter current multiplier system. Another counter current system is there, that is a counter current exchange system. You may recall that while discussing the structure of nephron, we came across vasa recta. The capillary bed which is present around nephron is known as peritubular capillary bed, and from that peritubular capillary bed, two capillaries they extend downwards and they follow loop of Henle, and they are in the form of or in the shape of English letter U. This capillary which follows the loop of Henle is known as vasa recta. Like the loop of Henle, it has descending limb and also it has ascending limb. Here, this is the descending limb of vasa recta, this is ascending limb of vasa recta. Within this blood capillary, blood flows slowly. So here what happens, from the descending limb, water is absorbed into the medullary tissue, whereas sodium ions and chloride ions they flow into the blood of the vasa recta in the descending limb. Then the opposite happens in the ascending limb. In the ascending limb, sodium ions and chloride ions they move out of the blood and they diffuse into the interstitial space of the renal medulla. Urea also comes out of the blood into this interstitial space in the renal medulla. So you can see here in the descending limb water coming out, and in the ascending limb water enters and it is carried away from the medullary tissue, and these ions urea they are retained here in the medullary interstitium. So this is the reason why the solute gradient which is established by the counter current multiplier system is not disturbed or it is not diluted. This is the counter current exchange system. Here there is exchange of water and solutes between blood in the vasa recta and the interstitial fluid which is in the renal medulla. This is the counter current exchange system. The counter current multiplier system establishes solute gradient here, and that solute gradient is maintained by vasa recta. The whole system is dynamic. If flow of filtrate in the loop of Henle or in the vasa recta, the flow of blood is obstructed, then this entire system will be disturbed. So this counter current exchange system and counter current multiplier system, they help in producing a concentrated urine. Next we have regulation of kidney function. Kidney function is regulated by different hormones. One such hormone which regulates kidney function is antidiuretic hormone, in short ADH. Its alternate name is vasopressin. This hormone ADH or vasopressin is produced in the hypothalamus and it is stored in the posterior lobe of pituitary gland. Depending on the requirement of the body, this ADH is released from the posterior lobe of pituitary gland, which controls the kidney function. When the blood is highly concentrated, or when the blood volume decreases, the body needs to retain water. So when blood volume is low, or when the solute concentration in the blood is high, the body requires to retain water. At that time, antidiuretic hormone comes into play. When blood volume decreases or when the solute concentration of the blood increases, this change in solute concentration of blood is detected by osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus. There are osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus which can detect the change in solute concentration of the blood. Then they will stimulate the posterior lobe of pituitary to release this hormone ADH or vasopressin. Under the influence of ADH, there will be increased absorption of water from the later part of the distal convoluted tubule and also from the collecting duct. Now we will see how this hormone works. This hormone increases the number of water channels in the cells of the later part of the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. The water channels are known as aquaporin 2. These aquaporin 2 are water channel proteins. Under the influence of this hormone, the number of these water channels, aquaporin 2, increase in the cells of the distal convoluted tubule and also in the cells of the collecting duct, so that there will be increased absorption of water. When there occurs increased absorption of water, the blood volume increases and the solute concentration is brought to normal level. When there is deficiency of the antidiuretic hormone, it will lead to a condition called diabetes insipidus. When there is a deficiency of ADH, or when the cells of the tubule they become insensitive to this hormone, it will lead to a condition called diabetes insipidus. In diabetes insipidus, there will be production of excessive amount of dilute urine. An individual which is suffering from diabetes insipidus may excrete about 20 liters of urine per day. 20 liters. So this is a huge quantity. A healthy human being excretes somewhere between 1 to 2 liters of urine per day, but a person with diabetes insipidus excretes about 20 liters of highly dilute urine. Such individual which is suffering from diabetes insipidus, to make up for the water lost in urine, has to consume a lot of water. This antidiuretic hormone is secreted when body requires water conservation or water needs to be conserved. Otherwise, antidiuretic hormone will not be secreted. When ADH is not secreted, there will be few number of these water channels, so not much water absorption occurs in such situation in the distal convoluted tubule and in the collecting duct. So, in these parts of the tubule, water absorption is facultative. Facultative water absorption means water absorption will occur depending on the requirement of the body. If the body does not require water conservation, there will be no absorption of water, no significant absorption of water from the latter part of the distal convoluted tubule and from the collecting duct. Then another hormone based regulation of kidney function is renin, angiotensin, aldosterone pathway. when the blood volume is low, the blood pressure decreases, and the juxtaglomerular cells, they secrete an enzyme called renin. Look at this diagram. This is the ascending limb of loop of Henle, which is close to the distal convoluted tubule. This part comes in contact with afferent arteriole and also with efferent arteriole. This is afferent arteriole, this is efferent arteriole. Where the ascending limb, wall of the ascending limb makes contact with the wall of the afferent arteriole, in that region you can see here cells are densely packed. Columnar epithelial cells are densely packed here. These cells are known as macula densa cells. Alongside the macula densa cells in the wall of the afferent arteriole, these are specialized cells called juxtaglomerular cells. These macula densa cells together with juxtaglomerular cells form juxtaglomerular apparatus. When blood volume decreases, blood pressure comes down, and then these juxtaglomerular cells, they secrete the enzyme renin. This renin then converts So you see here, this is the renin, an enzyme which is released by the juxtaglomerular cells in response to decrease in blood pressure. Then this renin converts angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. This angiotensinogen is a protein which is produced by the liver cells or the hepatic cells. This renin converts angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. This angiotensin 1 is then converted into angiotensin 2. This conversion of angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2 is brought about by an enzyme called angiotensin converting enzyme. This enzyme is produced by the endothelial cells in the blood capillaries of the lung. This angiotensin 2 has several functions. This angiotensin 2 causes vasoconstriction. Vasoconstriction means constriction or narrowing of blood vessels. By causing constriction of blood vessels, blood pressure is raised. Then its another function is to cause secretion of aldosterone. This aldosterone promotes absorption of sodium ions in the collecting duct and also in the distal convoluted tubule. When sodium ions absorption is increased, after absorption of sodium ion, naturally there will be absorption of water, so that blood volume will increase. Then it also stimulates the release of antidiuretic hormone. In response to antidiuretic hormone, there will be increased water absorption. So all these effects they raise blood pressure, and blood pressure is brought to normal level. Then another hormonal regulation of kidney function is arterial natriuretic factor or arterial natriuretic peptide. This is a hormone and it is produced by heart. This arterial natriuretic peptide is produced by heart and it is stored in the arterial muscle cells of heart. When the blood volume increases, blood pressure also rises. At that time, there will be stretching of heart wall. Since the blood volume increases, there is stretching of heart wall. When heart wall is stretched, these arterial muscle cells they are stimulated to release the arterial natriuretic factor. This arterial natriuretic factor then inhibits absorption of sodium ions in the kidney tubules. It inhibits aldosterone. Also, it inhibits the activity of antidiuretic hormone, and thereby there will be less absorption of water. When water is less absorbed, the blood volume decreases and the blood pressure is returned to normal level. So this is how the regulation of kidney function is brought about by different hormones, starting with ADH, then renin, angiotensin, aldosterone pathway, and finally arterial natriuretic factor. Then other organs involved in excretion. We have already discussed the function of the kidneys. Kidneys are the principal excretory organs. In addition to kidneys, there are certain other organs which also take part in excretion. The organs are skin, lungs, and liver. The skin is provided with blood capillaries. Also, it has sweat glands. The blood capillaries and the sweat glands of the skin, they secrete water, salts, and urea onto the skin surface. And they are lost from the skin surface. As sweat evaporates, along with sweat, those waste materials, they are also eliminated from the body. So this is how skin is involved in excretion. Then lungs. Lungs excrete water in the form of water vapor, and lungs also excrete the metabolic waste carbon dioxide. From the lung surface, during breathing, water is lost in the form of water vapor. Lungs also removes carbon dioxide from the body. In fact, lungs are the only organs in the body which excrete carbon dioxide in the gaseous form. Carbon dioxide is a metabolic waste and it is excreted through lungs. So lungs also take part in excretion by removing water in the form of water vapor and by removing carbon dioxide. Then liver. Liver is part of the digestive system. Although it is part of the digestive system, it also takes part in excretion. As you know, liver produces bile, and that bile contains bile salts. The liver contains bile salts, and the bile contains bile salts, also bile pigments. These are the bile pigments, bilirubin and biliverdin. These bile pigments, they are the excretory products, and these are produced as a breakdown product of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is found in RBC. When the worn out RBC are destroyed, the hemoglobin part breaks down, and these waste products are produced, bilirubin and biliverdin. These are the bile pigments, and they are excreted along with the bile. I have already told you about urea cycle. It is in the liver that urea formation occurs. So these are the different organs other than the kidneys which take part in excretion. Next we will know about kidney failure or renal failure. When both the kidneys they fail to perform their function, we call it renal failure or kidney failure. When there is renal failure, there will be accumulation of water, waste materials in the body, nitrogenous waste materials in the body, there will be salt imbalance, and if it is not treated, the individual will die within a couple of weeks. Renal failure or kidney failure is basically of two types. One is chronic and the other is acute. Chronic renal failure is progressive and it occurs over a period of several years. The kidneys are progressively damaged, and in case of acute renal function, the kidneys they stop functioning all of a sudden. The chronic renal failure, it occurs over a long period of time, and the possible causes of chronic renal failure are high blood pressure, uncontrolled blood sugar, then nephritis. Nephritis means inflammation of the renal tubules. Then if there is obstruction in the uterus, in the ureter, bladder, or in the urethra, or if there is reduced blood supply. In chronic renal failure, the urine output gradually decreases. There will be production of dilute urine, and there will be severe salt imbalance in the body. Whereas the acute kidney failure occurs when there is decreased blood supply to kidney, or when there is severe bacterial infection, or when there is obstruction of ureter, bladder, or urethra. In case of acute renal failure, there will be either no production of urine or very little production of urine, and there will be severe salt imbalance in the body. So, be it chronic or acute renal failure, for the survival of the patient, medical intervention is required. The patient with renal failure, for long-term treatment must undergo kidney transplantation, but kidney transplantation is very costly and it is not easy to find a kidney donor. So, a patient with kidney failure, till the time kidney transplantation is done, must undergo a medical process called dialysis. What is dialysis and how it is done, that we will discuss in our next class.